So I want to just start doing a bit around the head, I think. So should we get some grey in there? Maybe a little bit of grey, very light grey. Maybe just colour in the beak a little bit, which is this grey is very, very light. Just blending it a little bit of darker. I now feel like I need some medium maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure this is how I want to blend it. So I'm just going to leave that. But I'm going to mark out the line of the mouth. So we're just paying attention, and it's kind of like a very slight curve. And there's some little niggly bits. And now I'm looking at the beard underneath there, which I have painted brown. Just dabbing it, being really, really careful, especially around the edges. We don't want to go over the edges, and I can see that my brush is slightly split. So I am being very, very careful. I'm tempted to start outlining the eye. So the first thing I want to do is have a look at what it looks like, and I'm going to do the initial outline of it. So just that circle. So in the middle, the eye, there's actually quite a lot of brown in there. So I just want to fill in that with a generic brown first and let that dry a little bit. I think I'm going to add a tiny bit of white. Whoops. So I'm using just a bit of raw umber. I may need to warm that up a bit. So I'm just putting a touch of, there we go, that's a perfect colour. So raw sienna, raw umber. I'm just filling in the circle inside of the eye there. Again, it just looks, yeah, everything just looks a bit shit and awful at this point, and that is exactly what we want it to be. And I can actually see that I have neglected, so I thought it was shine and it's not. There is a little bit of white which is just located underneath the line of the beak, and it and just crossing over the line of the eye. So I've got quite a lot of paint, quite a lot of thick paint there. So I'm just putting in that now. And I think what I want to do is slightly layer in some of the stuff on the head, which is grey, further up on the head. So I'm not going to paint, it's not like a soup, there is a pattern there. I'm not going to paint super specific into it, mainly how it blends into, like the main shape of it and how it blends into the more red bits of it, which is that it's kind of in sections. So we're just going to make some kind of dabby lines going. Nice. I'm going to put a bit more white in that grey and make it lighter. And I'm going to put a bit of and it's actually quite a lot of white in this section just here. I think I want to wait for that to dry, and I want to erase this line. And the outline of that beak is just white as well, because that's where the light is falling on it. So I'm just observing the beak, the lower section of the beak there. It's going to make a very general wash, I think. So this is really, I really want to go over this with the open paint later on. Okay, so now I'm just looking at the beak underneath here, and it's just a bit of a mess, really. So we just need to kind of do the general, to make some general marks there. So we've got this kind of a triangle going up there, and then just next to that there is a bit of a, I'm just going to make some dabby, very slight dabby marks. And then I'm going to go over it with white later on to outline that. And also I can see that, so there's kind of like sections of white that kind of interferes here. So we got like a black, white, black, white, black, white kind of thing going on. So I'm just going to start marking that out. What you can do is just count how many there is, and there's kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 layers of white. But yeah, like we want to try and be really accurate, as accurate as we can be, as accurate as we need be, rather, not as we can be, but just as much as we need to without making ourselves insane. So there's a bit of a big white. Yeah, there's 2 big kind of white markings there. And then on the outside of this, so here, that is quite light. So we got that one, let's go 1, 2. Just trying to pay a bit of attention to where. And then trying to pay attention to where it ends. Something like that. What I want to do now is start having a bit more of a look on this section. Again, with the darker markings. So we are doing a bit of black and raw umber. Loading up the brush. And just going over some of the marks that I started making there. Trying to just find points of reference and making a mark in that general area. Honestly, it isn't, if you get some of these wrong, if you're a little bit off, it is generally fine. Okay, so this is the biggest one there, and then we have another very faint line going up towards there. One on the outside. That was a lot of paint I put on there. Okay. Just going over, and then this, because this being second layer, that this is now way more opaque than what it was the first time around. And when we look at these lines, especially these ones along the edge up there, I can zoom in a bit more on that, can't I? So when we're looking at these lines, they are actually, I think because they are in the middle of the feather, they're actually very round, and they have a very nice shape to them. And then when we look at the feather over that, we can see that there is a lot of white overlaying. So we're just extending the shape a little bit over there and knowing that we are going to be painting over it later. Starting to be a little bit more deliberate with my brush strokes and not so sloppy with things. And then this is actually 2 feathers. Now I've just given this whole section a wash, and this is going to be a bit of a concentration. So figuring out what's going on. Again, if we don't get it completely right, it's fine. I'm going to make this is kind of like just a load of feathers lined up over one another. And you can see these dark marks, they're kind of going through that whole line. So where does it begin? It begins underneath here. Very thin line. So this is now dry, and I want to layer that a little bit more. It's dark, and that's too light. So again, with the raw umber and burnt sienna. So now we're starting to get that colour, and I am just going to layer this with a bit of grey, and I'm just going to dab it because that starts giving it a bit of a feeling of texture. And I was going to rub out that line. I remember now that I'm there. Okay, so I am going to mix in a very matte brown grey. So that's just raw umber and white. And then I'm just going to paint around the eye. Paying a bit of attention to, we're just filling out the non-painted bits there. And then I just want to start adding a tiny bit of texture around there. So I'm putting a bit of black, and then just paying attention to what the shapes are. And again, I'm dabbing, very much just dabbing. So we have some lines of small feathers here, so we're just paying attention to what direction they're going. Dabbing. Let's see. Now there is a darker bit. So I'm going to start making some of the darker marks in the top in this on the head there, in the warm section of the head. So this is around the eye. So there's kind of like the eye, and then there is a light circle and then a darker one kind of surrounding it. So yeah, just paying attention to where those darker marks are and starting to put some in.